Welcome to Finding Ourself, a podcast about the power of presence, connection, and the transformation that is only possible through touch. So if you're curious about human connection, somatic healing, or what it really means to belong, you're in the right place. Let's find ourselves together. Welcome to Finding Ourself, a Cuddlist podcast. I am your host alongside Michelle Renee. My name is Keely Shoup. I am the CEO and co-owner of Cuddlist, and my co-host Michelle Renee also works with Cuddlist. Tell us a little about yourself.
Hi there, everybody. I am also a co-owner with Keely and the director of training and also a practitioner. Much like Keely, we have our own private practices, and we're really enjoying doing this podcast.
And we're very excited about who we have on today. I am thrilled. I feel honored, and I'm really, really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have with Judy Corasaniti. Judy, will you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure will. Yes. I am Director of Finance for Cuddlist. I'm also a certified Cuddlist. And my real passion is hope and healing for other people. I have a master's in business, and I've done teaching, and I've worked a lot in student success, those type of things. But the heart of it all really is to empower others. And so I'm excited to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
I absolutely. We're really honored that you're here. And I say that because you have one of the most unique perspectives that we've had of anyone on the show. You see all of this work through so many lenses, much more than the average person. First of all, it's unique that folks in like the entrepreneur, like the therapy space, for them to be business and finance savvy. I don't know if that's just like, it's just not a Venn diagram that has a huge overlap, right? Like that overlap is sort of small. So seeing your creative brain and your like your right and left brain pieces come together in how you process things, really cool and pretty unique in the industry. So you've got the perspective of like Cuddlist finance, like the business side of the overarching industry. So kind of a pulse on that. You've got your personal private practice, so how you are with clients. And then the last perspective that not all of us has is you started as a client first before you are exposed to any of the other things. And that was your entry point. Whereas most of us, like, I have been a client because I love this work, but I was a client because I had a passion for this work, was bought into it, was already a cuddle therapist at the time, and is like, I want this too. And that is
Right.
a different road to take. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your road that you took.
Sure. It's been quite a road. Let me just say that. Yeah, I started going to trauma therapy probably about 5, 6 years ago. And during the process of working through trauma, one of the things that came up really strong was just, I described to my therapist how, like, craving touch and uncomfortable in my body in certain ways and those type of things. And it became very evident in our conversations. She said, "Oh, you're touch starved." I'm like, "What in the world is that?" And so I said, my analytical part jumped in and said, "Okay, well, what do we do about that? Like, how do we handle that?" And I wanted a solution, automatically. And so we talked for a little bit about certain things. Like, she said, "Did you know people actually cuddle people, like, professionally in a therapeutic manner?" And I'm like, "That's crazy." Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
a thing, And so we didn't say any more about it. And of course, I got on and I started researching and Googling and where and how and who, and learned a whole lot and was amazed. And the little background on me was, when I showed up at trauma therapy, it was because I had experienced childhood sexual abuse and sexual abuse growing up. And I really, over the years, through activity in a Catholic cult community, those type of things, I realized that I thought I wasn't worth being touched. And it wasn't that nobody would or couldn't, but it was like, why would you want to? Like, I'm not worth it. I saw myself as damaged goods in a lot of different ways. And so, because of the self loathing that was so present, it made sense to me in my brain why I was, you know, starved for touch, but certainly didn't know how to get from that point to the other point, to be able to feel safe, to be able to trust anybody, those type of things. So through my Googling, I learned about Cuddlist and found out that there's such a thing. And that's actually, I found Michelle before I even found Cuddlist. And I found that there was a local person that provided cuddle therapy. And I met with her a few times, and it was interesting and fascinating. Um, but I still wasn't sure like what I wanted it to look like, what I was willing to do. And part of it was me learning to feel more safe in my body myself. And so I got on Facebook, anybody there that does such a thing. And that's honestly how I followed Michelle for almost a whole year before I reached out to her. I was coming out to San Diego for about a week and I said, any chance we could talk? So we got on, and the rest is really history. And that was about 2 years ago.
Thank you so much for sharing it. The bravery and vulnerability of sharing your story is really touching, and I'm really, really grateful that you're open to it. And it gives such a powerful look into how this work entered your life. And so what was for you, there was a whole year of thinking and processing and wondering about it. What happened in that year?
A lot of EMDR for those of you
For
that
sure.
know about trauma therapy, a lot of processing, a lot of conversation, a lot of tears, because I was like, could I believe it for myself? That was probably one of the greatest challenges. Could touch even be safe? Would it even be welcomed? I had an experience. I was at a conference some years back, and a friend of mine who I went to college with, who I know well, came up behind me and put a cowgirl hat on me because it was my birthday at this conference, and she wanted to surprise me. I almost threw her down a hill. Like I positioned myself to do it because she was in my proximity, and that hypervigilant part was like,
Mhm.
And so knowing that about me, I wasn't really sure how to change that. And I wanted a formula, and it's not a formula. For me, it was like I said, a lot of talking through the memories that were coming through from childhood, teenage years, college years, and it was also being vulnerable with my therapist and being willing to just step into that arena and speak so much of the shame. I realized for me, so much of my vision was so clouded because of shame. And I really believe that if you knew me, you couldn't possibly love me. And that put things in a whole different perspective for me, like because it was on me, not on anybody else. So that's kind of how it started. And so through that year, it was really working through some of those hardcore memories, but also uh, being really honest. And yeah.
I hear you talking about that in the past tense and
Mhm.
hearing it, and I imagine people who are listening or watching, there's like a blow, there's an emotional, empathy that comes up when you say that, and I'm curious, you are talking about it in the past tense, what was the transition out of those beliefs like?
It was a few different things. I think the primary thing for me was learning to trust myself in that journey. And it was also having hope for myself where there wasn't a whole lot of hope. To me, it was like, this is my story. I'm damaged goods. This is what was done to me. And since I saw myself through that lens, I envisioned others saw me that way. And no matter how much they tried, it was really hard to change that for me because I saw what I didn't do well, where the struggles were, and really where just seeing myself that way is damaged. And so it's vulnerable to speak about, but I, in the different circles, groups I'm a part of, support groups, my passion and my heart really is that other people know that there's hope and healing for them. And if this conversation moves that one little line, then it's 1,000% worth it. And yeah, so I think within that year, there were a lot of tears shed. There was a lot of horror stories told from my past and what had been done to me. And it was also trying to hold on to hope in the midst of what I'd experienced.
Makes sense why you're so connected to that hope and healing, that tracks, absolutely.
Mhm.
So then enter Michelle. Tell us
Yeah,
a little bit about that.
I want to say this. Can I say real quick? Because this isn't Because I'm really in an interesting space in in this conversation today, you're probably going to notice I just hold back and let Judy really lead this conversation. So I just want to preface that here to say that this is me, not because I don't have a lot of things I'd love to say, but because this is a public recorded conversation and I'm still honoring our confidentiality and letting Judy really be the one to drive this conversation, you're not going to probably hear a ton from me today. I'm going to be more witness. So,
How powerful it is to have someone with such a connection be a witness. I think witnessing can also be a really therapeutic tool and experience. And someone's just holding us in that. What we talk a lot about is unconditional positive regard. It helps
Mhm.
undo some of those stories when someone shows up over and over and over again with that kind of space holding and witnessing. So brilliant. And I love that you're speaking to it. It is helpful. We're broaching, I think, to talk a little meta in this conversation, because thank you for like taking the time to bring in this meta conversation. It is a it is an interesting relationship to navigate, speaking publicly and also talking about these different kinds of relationships, because we know, especially in the talk therapy world, there is a lot of discussion about what dual relationships are, how to have and how not to have them. There's a
Mhm.
whole lot there, and it can be heavy or fraught, and it can also, as we've seen, there can be some really beautiful moments in it. And I think exactly as you modeled, speaking to it, being really clear with how we're proceeding with it, being really transparent about how we proceed with it is the way. Like that's the model for moving forward. And part of that is the like communication and holding boundaries and keeping that clarity. So I love that you modeled that and that we are doing a challenging thing and navigating this, but a brave thing and navigating it.
Yes.
So yeah. Judy, feel free to speak to that if you want. And the question then I would invite is, so entered Michelle into that picture for you, and where did you go? So whichever you want to answer first or at all.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, first of all, thank you, Michelle. I think that is that's what the magic is to me. The fact that there is trust and there is respect that I feel at the deepest level. And that's powerful. It really is. Um, yeah, and one thing just to add or clarify something, it wasn't until, gosh, probably 6 years ago that I had more than one memory of things that happened through my childhood. And so I knew self-loathing and shame was such a part of me, but I blamed it on me, like what I messed up or what I didn't do or what I should have been type of thing. And now, about 6 years ago, I just felt like certain situations happened in my life that started to connect the dots. And when I met with my therapist for the very first time, I walked in there with just one memory. And since then, I'd easily have over 100 memories, I would say, for real, of situations. And so it was an amazing experience when I walked in there for the first time and showed up and just said, I need help, and how I got matched with my therapist. And we still meet today, in a therapeutic relationship. And I couldn't imagine how that would even go or what that would even be. And so to think about um, the quality of life I have today is so beyond what I ever imagined life was even capable of being like. It wasn't like I had this hope that I would be at this place. It was one of those like, I didn't even think it was a possibility or in the realm. And so, and it came from just what was modeled right now: the trust, the vulnerability, the willingness, the consent, those type of things that are so significant. And so, in the years before I had started working with Michelle, I did a lot of hard work with the therapist and lots of tears and lots of scary parts, especially for younger Judy, right? In terms of like the memories that would come up and the shame and just how I saw myself, ugly, flat faced, etc. And those were the lenses. And so it was the vulnerability of giving voice to those things and really giving voice to shame and uh, which is very challenging, but so freeing also. It's a really a both and in quite a dynamic way. And so, fast forward to when I met with my therapist, we talked about touch starved. I did research for about a year. I watched some videos, some things like that, and it raised enough curiosity that I thought I was watching this video and this show, and they showed someone coming in and providing support for this individual. And how they did it just modeled like me. When I heard the person tell her story, it was so similar to my story. And I just kept thinking, well, wait a minute. If that could work for her, is there even a little bit of a possibility that I could even find out about? Is it even possible? Right. And so that's when I did talk to my therapist a little bit about it. And then I had reached out to Michelle, and we did the intake and talked about who I was, what I wanted, where I was at. And I was 1,000% honest and very vulnerable. I actually called her and then realized it would be a whole conversation. And a lengthy conversation. I pulled over and just shared my heart, just was honest. This is my story. This is where I'm at. I need help. I'd love to meet with you and just get to know you and see how it feels, with no envisioning of anything beyond that. Just simply, I followed you for a whole year on social media. You resonate so deeply with me. Could we meet? So,
And what was that meeting like?
yeah, when we met in person, you'll hear the pauses. The pauses are the tears welling up, right? In the gratitude overflowing, in my heart. I, uh, where do I begin? So I basically showed up at her space, and she welcomed me in, and we just sat there and just chatted. And because of my background, I recognized, wow, her door is shut, and I feel really peaceful. And to me, part of the greatest gifts I've been given in my therapy work with my therapist, and she's been amazing at, is me literally learning and training how to listen to my body and trust my body. And so I remember sitting in her room where she is right now, and just this is amazing how I feel. That was the honest reaction, and I was like, my first thought was, there's something like special, or there's something. This is because to me, I realized how brave it was to even walk in the door, how brave it was to call her to show up a stranger's door, someone I followed for a year. I knew had the certification and the training with Cuddlist, which I didn't even quite understand what that meant, other than that she was vetted. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
so it was amazing. And we just sat there, and she explained the code of ethics, the consent, what that meant, what that looked like, and we just sat side by side. And what a journey! What an incredible journey! And the thing that really struck me was how safe I felt in my body. That hit me hard, because that's not a typical feeling I had had much at all, and I just felt safe. Period. And I was like, this is wild. Like, I'm just sitting here next to her, and like, no touch, nothing. And I feel safe with her.
If you had to, I don't know if this is possible, but you, before that moment, had been in other circumstances and other instances with healthcare providers or therapeutic professionals. But I hear you echoing over and over again how safe this felt, as if it was a very unique, or like the first time, or it was so noticeable that you're remarking on it, remarking on it as so crucial or key to it. And I'm
Yes.
curious if you can identify, what about that space? What about that kind of conversation, whether it was what you were talking about, or the space in general, or the physical things that happened? What made that give you that feeling, if you can put a finger on it?
I think um, up until that point, very few people had felt safe. And one of the things that I saw develop in my relationship with my therapist was feeling safe in space with her, with the door shut. And that was really amazing for me to have that awareness of. And like I have not done a very good job at taking care of myself. Like when I went to the dentist, a friend had to go with me and literally placed her hand on my foot to have a touch component because it felt so triggering to have someone in that close of a space for me. And same thing with the doctor. Like none of that felt comfortable at all for years and years and years. Like I don't know if I can remember it ever feeling comfortable, to be honest with you. I think when more of the memories were repressed, it was easier in some ways. But as I started doing the processing, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that's why I feel that way. So I think when I was sitting there with Michelle in that very room right now, there was in my body all that I used to feel. I felt that variance, right? I felt like, wow, wow. Like I don't feel nervous. I don't feel scared. I just feel really at peace here. And it was just amazing. And I think part of it was when we had our conversation on the phone, and it was probably an hour, right, Michelle, when we first
It was
talked.
but
And
it was definitely longer than what I had scheduled. And
yeah,
I'll own that I made a decision to let the call go longer because it was so important.
hmm yeah, because she asked me like one of those magical questions. Well, what makes you have a desire to do this type of work? And I was like, oh, honey, like where do I begin? And it was the ability of not feeling of the self-loathing and shame that made it hard to walk in. And that even trumped the safe feeling. For me, it was just the fact, could I really choose to be with someone and be that brave, you know? And I did, and I'm forever grateful. And so what happened when I was with Michelle, that, is there anything you want or need? Or is there any type of position? Or we can just sit here and talk, or would you like to hold my hand? Like, and just talked about what a client led session looked like, and, ask, ask for anything you want. And I'm like, oh, I have no idea. But I do remember, and Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, I remember holding hands at first. I think that's what I remember.
Sounds
You
right.
sat beside me and you literally just held my hand. And I was like, wow, wow. Like she's okay with holding my hand and she knows the story. I was very honest and very explicit to some degree, of what had happened and painted a picture, and not the specifics, because to me that comes out of trust and out of sharing your story with people that you trust, and even not sharing your story with people that you trust, just kind of like where it resonated within me. And so at the beginning, we didn't even really talk a whole lot. And as she sat there and I sat beside her, I said, I think I'd feel okay just to lay down. And Michelle was laying against the wall and I was laying there. And the very first thing I noticed when I laid down was my back was to the door. And that was an absolute never, ever, ever, never. Because then how could I care for myself? How could I get out of the situation? It's only been probably in the past year when I go to movies, like, oh my gosh, I didn't have to sit in this seat so I could see all the exits. And it's very subconscious in a lot of ways. It's just what my body had been conditioned to do over the years. Um, and it was more of a hypervigilance in some ways, but it was so normal for me, it didn't seem different. Where somebody
Right.
listening there might be like, what? And I'm like, oh, I like my friends know, my close friends know where I sit in a restaurant facing the door type of thing. So anyway, that was one of the things that stood out to me so dramatically when I lay down and I just turned my back to the door. And I was like, and she looked at me and like, are you okay? And I said, my back is to the door. And I said, that's crazy. Like I said, the fact that like whatever I feel in this space with you, there's this trust and I can't even quite explain it, but I just feel safe. I feel safe being here and just having the opportunity to just be here. And we did have some moments of real silence, and that felt beautiful, special, to just be in a space with somebody. One of the things that stood out to me over the years, some years back, I went to a grief support group when I lost a dear friend of mine. And I remember hearing about the Jewish practice of sitting Shiva with somebody. And that's literally where, when somebody passes and the Jewish community is supporting them, they literally just come and sit in your living room with you, in your family room with you. Not getting you stuff, doing things, literally sit with you. And the idea of like holding space, sitting with someone that could be so absolutely, uh, it just felt so beautiful. I felt so seen. I felt so understood. And I was like, how is that even possible in such silence? And again, over the couple years in working with my therapist prior to that, we had beautiful moments of that in a therapy session where I just cried and she just sat with me, or it was just quiet between both of us. And looking back and even current in my work with her, those are still some of the most sacred moments that we share, because sometimes there really are not a lot of words. With some of the things I've shared, like there's nothing that's going to change my experience. And the heartache and the pain and the anger I feel, it's a process, I'm working through it. So that always, and I thought about that in that moment. It was like Michelle was sitting shiva with me in the midst of all the grief and the pain and the suffering of the memories that had come up that I'd worked through with my therapist that had been repressed for my entire life. And so the horrificness and the validity of that was so huge and significant. And that was okay. It was okay just to be in that space. And it's a
It
beautiful thing.
wasn't too heavy. There was enough. Michelle would hold it with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and there wasn't like
Yeah.
all these expectations. It was just be.
I think when I think about that first session, we have had some heavy sessions since then. That was not a heavy session.
No.
Like it really wasn't. And
Yeah, I'm curious about your experience of it from the other side.
yeah, I remember asking you, what's it like to have a second cuddlist, right? Because usually I'm somebody's first. And now you're somebody who's coming in who has seen someone else, but also has a trauma background. And I was really curious. I remember asking you, like, what do you notice the differences between your first time ever and your first time with a new person? And like looking to see some of the building blocks. Like, have you looked back and noticed that you've built some real foundational trust in yourself to show up again as a first, but to compare what the difference was? Do you remember me talking about that, Judy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again,
So that was,
go ahead.
I was just say that was the my brain is also very analytical and I like science and all these things. So I'm like in my head going comparison, and not like comparing me to the other practitioner, but comparing Judy's experience between a first and a first with a new person, and trying to facilitate a connecting of experience and in like body data.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say what I think it was interesting too. Like when I saw someone here locally, and we sat and talked probably the first 2 times before even sitting beside each other, and that's what I was comfortable with. That was it, and that was okay. And I remember a few months into it, I had probably met with this other person twice, and I finally said something to my therapist and said, I chested this out. Remember we talked about this a few months ago. And it was shame that was holding me back from even telling her that I like tested the waters, because I still wasn't even feeling convinced it was really worthy. I didn't think, like, I felt like I was too much. Like if you really knew my story of all type of things that had gone on. So why even bother? Like why even bother explaining it and bringing this? And then I got real honest with her and said I did it and it was nice and we'll see, type of thing. And yet in me, there was just, after following Michelle, I just felt like there was a lot of areas where we resonated on, and her authenticity and her fullness of what she brings to the space was just, yeah, let's do this. Let's meet and see what happens. So, because I felt like I'll either do more sessions or just make a new friend in San Diego and it's all good, type of thing.
That's even a pretty optimistic or brave way of looking at it, on its own. For a lot of folks, that
Yeah.
would be challenging, but it's beautiful to hear your experience of it. And then you to develop that working relationship, helping you and supporting you as you're navigating this memory recovery and processing through this. Um, I'm curious if there are any other explicit stories or specific story, not explicit, but like specific stories that are coming up for you that were really hallmark moments for you up until you got to decide at some point, I think I might want to do this.
hmm I think it was um 2 years ago, I wasn't in the space I am today in terms of like listening to my body. I had an awareness of when I felt peaceful, very different than today. Like today, I feel much more grounded and much more integrated in some ways. And one of the things I appreciated was to know that it was a safe space I could just talk about anything. That's probably one of the hallmarks for me in the first couple sessions I did with Michelle that stood out to me that I could just talk about anything. And it was welcomed. It wasn't tolerated. It was welcomed. It wasn't about like fixing me or changing me. It was just, this is my story. Each of you have a story. This is my story type of thing. And that was just really powerful for me to experience. Because I've a lot of judgment, criticism, lost some friends, all kind of things that have gone on in the past. And it was just it was a special space. And I felt that.
I'll add that on top of that general point that Judy's making is watching that transform, like from a you like me despite my story
Mhm.
to being able to transfer into, I wanted Judy so desperately to understand that I like her, actually I love her because of her story,
Mhm.
right? Like, to me, Judy's story is a story of triumph. And like, those are qualities that are quite admirable in a human being to be in relationship with. Like, if Judy had never gone through anything, I just don't know a lot of people that even can claim that they haven't gone through anything in their life. And so, like, I think as I look at like the last 2 years, I think Judy's come a long ways. I can't speak for Judy, but I get the feeling I get less apologies coming from Judy.
Mhm. Yeah. And actually, less thank yous probably in a good way. Because to me, it was like, well, thank you for being my friend. Thank you for tolerating me, was how I would look at it. I remember you brought up a great memory, Michelle, my very first appointment with a therapist. And I remember sitting there. And again, can you give me just a little timeline of your experience and what brings you here today? Was what she had asked me. And I was like, this is all that I knew. I knew this one memory. I know the self loathing. And I just said the self loathing and the shame I carry. I have no idea because I could see to some degree, yeah, how I was treated getting out of the religious community that was started out really well, but ended up really hurting in a lot of lost relationships, deaths in the family, those type of things. And I just started sharing anything I knew that painted the picture of self-loathing and shame. And I remember clear as day, I was like, I said, I'm okay if I'm too much. I'm okay if you're not able to help me. But I thought at least I'd give this one try. And two things happened. She goes, "You're a badass." And then she said, "Bring it. Go ahead, just bring it." And I was like, okay. And it was such a different experience from a previous counselor I had met with years ago. And basically, that counselor gave me a booklet that said 30 Days of Freedom from Shame. And after working through day 3, I was like, I felt too ashamed to even go back and do anything. And her and I had been in counseling for a while, but it was more about trying to fix and trying to give me a formula. And night and day different. So I was honest with my therapist and said, I'm even feeling a little jaded coming in here because I don't know. I've had some rough experiences, trusting people. So, and I feel like that has always stayed with me, the badass part. It really has. And it was like, oh, it gave me a flicker of hope within me that she saw something in me that made me worth her time. That's the honest answer.
Mm.
And that was what I experienced with Michelle and with the other cuddlist I met with locally, because I was coming to them in a therapeutic manner, right? And saying, this is the mess that I'm in. This is where I'm at. And I don't want to be fixed. I don't. And I remember my therapist saying to me, I'm not going to fix you because you're not broken. And I was like, drop the mic. Are you serious? Like, I felt so welcomed and so happy because I didn't want to be fixed. I just wanted the pain to go away. I just
Yeah.
wanted the memories to stop. I wanted the night terrors to stop. I wanted to feel safe just for a moment. And more than anything, I've had an issue with a chronic sore throat for about 19 years. And when I showed up, I had said, I've had this throat pain forever, did all the testing medically, met with a chiropractor, nutrition, everything. And I went back to the chiropractor and said, nothing's been resolved. I still have it. And he said, what are you not giving voice to? And that was one of the things that propelled me to meet with a therapist and find somebody.
Our bodies are amazing.
I was just
Mhm.
thinking the same thing. We've had another episode where one of us was like, "This is hard for me to talk about," and then literally coughed, and the other person
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, "Oh, is that? Do you think that's why it's or a reflection of it being hard to talk about this?" I'm like, "Man, maybe because our bodies definitely show up and are a reflection of our inner worlds in
Absolutely.
ways that
Yeah,
are
I've yeah.
profound." Yeah.
Yeah, I've had tremendous coughing sessions in therapy. Tremendous, huge ones. Uh, and I'm excited because just in the past couple months in working with my therapist, I've seen a shift where like the pain is like on a scale of 1 to 10, it's usually like a 12 or an 18. Honestly, it just hurts all the time. And there's been moments where it's been like 3 to a 5 where I'm like, oh wow. And just in the past couple weeks I've noticed a shift, but we've gotten deep, in the therapeutic work and the amount of shame and the things that you say that you think are never okay to say, even as a young child or as an adult. Like, I can't say how it really felt, I can't say what they really did. Um, and then it really hit me. That's the very thing that's buried there. I believe there's so much shame buried there. And what do I need to give voice to? So,
Mm.
Are we ready to talk about your decision to take the Cuddlist training? Do you think, or is there anything else you wanted to talk about in your the client side of your life?
um, I'm ready to go there. Yeah. And I'll probably intermix some things that help
Okay.
brought me to that decision. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so what was we had the new training had started. I think you took the training in July of 2024.
Mhm. Yep.
What
Yeah.
was
And
that like what was that decision process like to decide I think I want to take the training?
I think, uh, I think part of it was curiosity, part of it was understanding consent, but I think the bigger part was um, my passion for hope and healing, and to be a vessel of that, right? To just be a conduit, as I say, of that. And I realized this was a tool in my toolbox that I did not have.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of other like therapeutic modalities that I over the past 5, 7 years have grown into to offer. And yet there was so much value that I found in my personal experience in working with a cuddlist. How can I promote support and embrace that? And that was a huge decision to know if I was really ready. And I thought, you're taking training, like microdose, right? You're taking training, see where the steps go. There's no pressure. Take it and just learn from it. And that's kind of really what I went into it with, a curiosity for sure, but also what I saw modeled by you and that other cuddlist person. And both of you very different in how you do it, but that was appealing to me because it also spoke that what what my body leads with, what resonates within me is how it gets developed. There's not a cookie cutter way to do it or this way or not that way.
It's
And so
personal.
that's when I taught. Yeah, exactly. And that's when I taught you and said, you know what, I think I think I want to take this course and see where it goes. And and then I did. And it was so good. The training is really, really good. And I'm not getting paid to say that. It was just really, really helpful. And it was really basic, but it was also, you could tell it was tried and tested. You can tell it was it covered all the bases. Consent to me 1,000% was the trauma informed. And I think when I started working with Michelle, when I started working with my therapist, the number one thing I noticed was the trauma informed. And I think that was a big piece of the, I feel safe here, I feel understood here. Because apart from that, I had felt so triggered. And sometimes I know in my experience in talking with others, there are things that could trigger us that might have nothing to do with anybody else. So, for example, Old Spice, the person that had violated me wore Old Spice. And so I remember being in a store and seeing it on the shelf, and I could feel my body just grip. I teach part time at a college, and a student recently just did a marketing presentation on Old Spice.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, we didn't cover this in therapy. We covered being triggered, but this is a whole different level. Like, is there
Right.
something customized to help with this? You know? And I thought I could feel inside, and it was like, I have tools. And over the years of working in therapy and feeling some deep triggering moments in the classroom, regardless of what's going on, students, I'll be backward and take a 5-minute break. And I'll just do that. And I'll step outside, and whether I do some like tapping or deep breaths or so many of the tools in the toolbox that my therapist worked with in the first year to have available, but also for me to be able to like utilize and pick which one was going to be beneficial.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, the trauma informed part to me helped me understand even in those moments. And I feel like the training for me, the working with Michelle, the working with the other cuddlists locally was huge because of the trauma informed part. I want everybody in the world to be trauma informed. That's my hope.
Mm.
Because I think there's a way we can love and show up for one another in a way that provides not just like empathy is important, but a realness, like a transparency in a sense. Like I'm here for you and I believe in you. And that human regard, I would say.
And a
So
roadmap.
that's
Yeah,
good.
I think what I hear you say and what I've noticed as well is when you say, "I wish everyone had a little trauma-informed training," there are ways in which we just don't know how
Hmm.
to show up
Right.
for
We
other
don't know what we
people.
don't know. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and I think a lot of the times we get a message that it's too much or all those things that you mentioned, like it's too much, or if I am here while someone else is having a big emotion, I'm gonna cause a problem or it's gonna be bad, and like we have to stop this immediately because whatever
Sure.
is happening is bad. But I think one of the biggest benefits and one of the strongest lessons in trauma training is that the trauma response, while it can overwhelm our system, while it can be pretty exaggerated or big, it's also a healthy thing that your body is doing
Hmm.
as a
Absolutely.
natural process and
Hmm.
knowing how to simply, like, maybe put some bumpers on the bowling alley, right? Like, knowing just simply how to be present to create a little bit of a safety buffer is a lot of part of it,
Sure.
and bringing people back to the present moment. Like,
Right.
there's some pretty simple things that we can do to do that, and then we're not negatively impacting the experience, but the experience can
Sure.
happen. It's not like the
Yeah.
be all end all, the worst thing that can happen.
Right.
We wanna avoid it when we can, and we wanna be able to cope and support and give some safety and stability if it does, because it's also a
Sure.
natural process.
Right. And I felt like the training provided tools. And I love that. And the tools so aligned with me and who I am and what I see. And just over the 5 years in therapy, learned to resonate so deeply with me. And I think of some of the other modalities and the other type of trainings and certifications I have, and they all align. It's the fact that I am passionate about empowering others, and I felt like this is just an amazing tool to be able to do that. And so that's what drew me to the training, and it did not disappoint. It was really significant. And it was cool too, because in learning the training, I was like, wow, this is amazing to see Michelle checkmark. Like, this is how
I
she
was gonna
followed. And it
ask you
wasn't,
that. I'm so glad you got there and are just saying it because I was gonna be like, what do you know? Like as you were taking the training,
yeah,
were there moments where you're like, that's what they did, or oh, I
it is.
see.
That's exactly it. Yeah, the consent, the client led, and understanding what client led meant. It means you could ask for anything and there's a yes or a no. But part of that is one of the greatest gifts in friendships or in partnerships, right? Where we learn to say yes or no and not take it personal. Like in my past, it would be you say no, what did I do wrong? It must be me. It was never, honestly, never the other person. It was me. What did I do wrong? I'm to this, I'm to that, and how I saw myself. And again, some of that came. I remember being in second grade and being called flat faced by a classmate. Second grade. How many years ago was that? And I'm telling you, about 5 years ago, I realized that was something I really needed to do some work on in therapy, because those are the lenses we see ourselves through, regardless of what age. Names that we've been called, people that made fun of us, people that rejected us. And some of it, yes, take responsibility for ourselves in it. But other times, it really is what was done to us and how that shows up. And I think for me, uh, even being in the class with others in Zoom on the training was just a magical experience, because the uniqueness of each person. And I'm always intrigued, teaching college for so many years, the uniqueness in the individuals. And I love this quote my friend shares about, like, we're all just walking each other home.
Mm.
And I want to do it well. And I thought, what's the modality of how I can do that and do it well? And I started looking over my years and I was thinking, gosh, I coached basketball, I umpired, I was youth minister at my church for a number of years. I actually co-authored a book on student success, like all these type of things I've done. But I saw the consistency in my passion for others to know. And I'm driven by that. And that's one of the things that really drove me to Cuddlist. I uh I just had a passion to understand it and then also hear the other side of it, because I did experience it, and it was like, wow, it was like looking behind the curtain in a sense, like, what is this really all about and how have they been trained? And so it was a dynamic experience for me, you
Mm.
know.
There's
Can
some
I
good.
share real quickly? That reminds me, I just finished a cohort and we had someone that was in class because they had a Cuddlist session. It was so impactful for them.
Mm,
I think that they might have said something like it felt like 10 therapy sessions in one. And they just were taking the class for personal development because they needed to know more. They
mm,
had that one experience and they needed to know more. And it's like, this is not a modality that we hide behind a curtain like the Wizard of Oz or something, right? It is like, yeah, you could take it and have zero intention of practicing. If Judy, if you had taken it and didn't want to turn this into part of your integrative coaching work, that would have been okay.
mhm. Yeah, and I knew that. And I think for me it was just a really beautiful experience, and it took me a few months to process it all, you know. And I think again, um and I'll probably say this a bunch more times, but with you, when you said that, Michelle, what it made me again realize, and it's something you and I've talked about extensively, is the foundation that was built for when I started working with you in the Cuddlist form was the foundation that was laid with tools the first year. My therapist and I did challenging belief worksheets for an entire year before we started EMDR. Because again, what we think and how powerful that is. And so where's the evidence, right? And over again. And I know I would like look at her, are you serious? We're going to do this again. But now looking back on it, that was the secret sauce, right? That was the magic, because going into recognizing challenging beliefs and then doing EMDR work, there wasn't such a challenge when things came up. I was able to give voice to them and own my story in a sense, but not relive it. I think that's one of the most powerful things in it. And so I felt like the foundation was laid to add someone else to my committee, as I say, in terms of working with Michelle and growing in that more.
So now you're so fast forward, and I remember I think I was with Keely this summer when I got a text from you that you had just had your first session as a practitioner.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It was one of those experiences of it took me a while, put my profile up. And really, I think for me, it was trusting I knew my yeses and my nos. And it wasn't about like fixing somebody. Like I have this aversion to like the codependent part. And I respect people who that's a challenge for, but it was like I was like, I know I would do a disservice as I was trying to fix them or change them. But it was more help you find out within yourself. That was really my passion and my heart's desire. And so yeah, I had someone reach out to me and we went through the process, the vetting process to make sure that we would be a good fit for one another, that I was providing the platonic touch that she was asking for. And we met and we just sat at a table and just talked for a while. And then we sat side by side and she just simply said, would you just put your arm around me? And again, checking with myself, can I do that? It's like, I can do that. I don't know why. I tend to close my eyes because I want my focus. And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And so she just sat beside me and we sat that way for like a half hour. And then she just started pouring out her heart to me. And I just listened and held space. I sat shiver with her in a profound way. Just sat with her in the midst of the pain and the heartache and the suffering. And then it was over. Our time had come to an end. I asked if there's anything you want or need in this moment. And I said, we have about 10 minutes left, anything that feels unfinished. And that was the conclusion. And and then she left and I just sat there and I cried, cried, cried. On so many levels, there were so many tears of gratitude, of my therapist, of Michelle and others who have come alongside me and held space for me and believed in me. And they didn't believe in me to become this or to change to this. They believed and they held hope for me when I wasn't able to. And that's what I felt so deeply. They just held hope for me and cheered me on, but yet you'll know, you'll know. And so it was a profound experience for me. And I remember a couple months ago, Michelle and I were talking, and I said, Michelle, I said, it's the from no to pro. That's how I wrote about it in my journal. And I was like, from somebody who had an aversion to people being in their personal space to be in a place where I was able to offer to hold someone when they were crying as a professional.
It's kind of mind-blowing. Hearing the story, it is absolutely remarkable. Yeah.
And you're doing it from a space of you are so somatically aware. And so, I think there's I remember back in the day, early Cuddlist lore here, that before anyone was allowed to join training, they had to do a call with Madeline. Sorry, I have a fly in my space. They had to do a call with Madeline, and I eventually was trained to do those calls so Madeline didn't have to. And a lot of the questions were like, are you ready to do this work? Should you actually be a client and not a practitioner? And a lot of what we were really looking for was unresolved trauma. Because what we don't want is somebody to kind of disassociate, like show up in their work and just be a disassociated body because of their trauma showing up, right?
It can at least end them hurting themselves and hurting others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I see here is like I trust your ability to do that in now none of us are 100%. I have had triggers show up in sessions, and I have done things in a way that I wish I could have shown up differently for in session because of my history. We're never 100%
Mhm.
um free of that. But I have zero doubt that you have the capability to listen to yourself, and that I never I have zero doubt that if you felt anything off, I know you as a person that would not put yourself in this situation,
Mhm. Absolutely.
and that you would use your no,
Yes.
or you wouldn't take a client. Like, there was never a part of me that worried that your history was going to put you in a unnecessarily dangerous space
Absolutely.
for you or the client,
Absolutely.
right? And
Yeah.
so it always felt like, what a great next step for you
Mhm.
to be able to, like, your message of hope and healing, that this is another step of showing that you can go from no to pro.
Mhm. Yeah, and as you say that, one of the things that comes to mind was, I would guess to say about 5 years ago, so it was probably about a year and a half or 2 years into therapy, and I remember being invited to, become trained as a dancing mindfulness facilitator, and I love dance, I love music, I love all different genres of music, I play the drums, those type of things, and I was just, like, got my djembe going, and I'm like, "This sounds really fun." So I signed up for it. And it wasn't like line dancing or anything like that. It was really about music playing and just feeling it in your body and moving to it, you yourself. It reminded me in some ways of like a wedding reception for a family member where everybody just gets there and dances however they dance, type of thing, and there's no judgment. And the beauty about this space was there was no judgment, and you just listened to your body and moved with whatever resonated. And I remember that being a turning point of me, like, I stood there for a while. And in this training, I mean, it's an all day, it's a whole weekend, but there's one day where it's pretty intense, and then you have to share your practice. And so in front of the class, you have to lead a dancing mindfulness session as part of your certification, right? And I remember, give me some good Bruno Mars, dance music. And to me it was just so powerful to walk people through literally just listening to their body. And for some, their body might have just wanted to tap. For others, their body might wanted to just twirl, but there was no right or wrong. And that's where some of the training and certifications have been so healing in the process. But yet, again, it's that, what can we give? What can we share? And I remember that was kind of what really launched me into, like, after that, I got Reiki master level training. I went through 3 different levels, and I just started doing things that resonated within my body, knowing that I could be that conduit for others.
Amazing.
Mm.
Here's my last question, I think. The story and your experience and your story is so rich, and the growth that, I mean, you said it perfectly, from no to pro. Like, it's what
Mhm.
an arc. Was there anything along the way that you learned about yourself or about this that surprised you? What was the most surprising thing that you never thought that you would learn?
In general, or specifically in the Cuddlist?
Well, now I want both answers. I think I was asking, like, around your work with Cuddlist, whether it's client or
Yeah.
practitioner, but in general too.
Yeah, I think one of the most profound things that I realized was that I am worth it. I am worth it, that I am able, in a profound way, and, like, to my toes, know that. And I think in a general way, it was really knowing that it's okay to ask for help. It's really okay to let others in and take down the barricade one brick at a time that I had built up, because I wasn't worth it. So I wanted to hide, and to realize I'm not too much, and what I have can be of value to others. And my story can in some way, like I said in the beginning, just give some hope and healing to others. It's profound. As director of finance for the Cuddlist company, I do a marketing call right at the end of the month every month. And this last month, we talked about your profile and the profile that you put up. And I recorded a portion of the call for the training. And then in the discussion with those who are online in membership talking about it, I said, but think about what it was that made you say yes to take the training, to invest in the training, to invest your time in the training. And I said, what is your why? And I've done a lot of business consulting over the years with people, and I talk about your target market and what your why is. And I said, what is your why? Like, where's your passion at for this? And I just paused and I could see the different faces, right? And then nobody was saying a word. And I said, I'll share my why. And I paused and was like, oh, what do I really want to say here? And I said, my why is because I have a passion in me for this work, for Cuddlist work, for consent work, for people to know that there is others out there beyond ourselves that can help us become the best version of us, whatever that looks like. They can help us know that there is healing possible, that what you've been told doesn't have to be the end of your story. And those things. And I shared that with them when I was talking about my profile and how I've revisited it and changed it. But I said the bottom line is I want to be consistent across the board. So if you look at like my Reiki intro, if you look at my teaching intro, I am me 1,000%. And for me, that was one of the greatest things I've learned through my journey in therapy, but also in my work on myself, through the different modalities like Cuddlist. And I went to a dancing mindfulness experience and I was like, oh, I want this tool. Right. And so part of it is learning those things about ourselves and really seeing what resonates and then saying yes to it,
Love
sticking
that.
our toes in.
Anything else,
Can you-
Michelle? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. As we wrap, and I want to ask you, where can people find you? I also happen to know that you're working on a new release soon. Do you want to
Yes.
talk about that real quick before
Yes, I
we
would
part
love
ways
to.
today?
Yeah. Yeah. So a few years back, I wrote a little booklet called Bridge of Hope. And I would like to end this time with reading one of those short poems because I feel like that's my heart for others. And so it was called Bridge of Hope. And it was literally stories taken from my journal entries after my therapy sessions when I would just sit and write. And I never liked to journal at all because I didn't want anything in writing. I didn't want the reminders, etc. And then in a certain part of the process in therapy, and it continues in therapy today, just writing sometimes is such a good way to process. And so I literally was looking at the world during COVID and I thought, what do people really need right now? They need hope. And so I wrote the poetry book, Bridge of Hope. And then I went through the uh, masking myself. And I was like, wait, I'm an economics, tax accountant, finance, marketing person, and I'm going to have a poetry book. And I was like, I'm not owning that imposter syndrome. This is a part of who I am. Like you said in the beginning, like there's unique parts in each of us. And so fast forward to that, we didn't talk about the triad model. I don't know if there's a moment to do that.
No, we didn't. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I worked in the triadic model with Michelle and my therapist, and we've been doing that about a year now. And it has been amazingly powerful. And if you don't know what that is, there's some great resources available on the Cuddlist website that talks about the triadic model, but it's primarily a cuddle therapist and your therapist, personal therapist, working together on your behalf. And so before I meet with Michelle for a session, the three of us, my therapist and Michelle, will get on Zoom and talk, or Marco Polo, like we recently discovered, and just avenues to share. And then we had an opportunity to do a session together, the three of us to do a triadic session together. Super, super powerful. And I bring that in because after the triadic session with Michelle here and the therapist, the three of us all met together, I remember the next day, and I said to Michelle, wow, what a gift relationships are. And I just paused and I thought, and one of my therapist phrases that she has reminded me of a whole lot of times is that we heal in community. And for me, the struggle with this depression, isolation, I'm not worth it type of thing. And the encouragement was we heal in community. And so, anyway, I remember talking to Michelle the next day, and I said to her, I'm starting a booklet, another booklet I'm writing. And I said, it's called The Gift of Relationship We Heal in Community. And I go through and talk about all the different ways we heal in presence, we heal in our hand being held, all the different ways I have experienced healing in this sense of community in relationship to others. And so I'm super excited about it. I decided that the published date is going to be my grandma's birthday, which is in a couple weeks, because my grandma has she's so much of who I am today and where I am today. I've heard her cheer me on so many times. Um, so I'm excited about it. So yeah, it'll be coming out the mid-September, September 17th. It's getting published. So I've been a busy beaver working on that. But I wanted to share a poem, and it just seems so fitting. It's called Cheering You On. And again, I remember sitting in my car after a really heavy duty therapy session and just crying and crying and crying. And, but I felt so free and I felt so understood. And I just sat there and thought, how can I have cried my guts out, told some really ugly, painful things that had been done to me, and sit in my car and feel this relief? And I was just like, my analytical couldn't make sense of it, right? But my body could. And so as I sat there in the car, I pulled out an envelope sitting in my car and I wrote this journal entry, which is a poem. And it's called Cheering You On. And it's my words to both of you, Keely and Michelle, and my appreciation for each of you. And then also what I would share with the broader audience, that my heart, I am cheering you on. So with hope in your heart, with determined spirit, head held high, step by step, slow and steady, hesitant yet moving forward, scared and vulnerable, strong and brave. You can do this. You got this. I am cheering you on. And that really is my word. I remember strong and brave, scared and vulnerable, and how they coexist. I could do a whole nother podcast on the coexistence of those things.
Mhm.
And I realized, to me, that's my true heart. My passion to cheer others on. But it's one of those, it's hard to love our neighbor when we can love our neighbor, but it can be exhausting if what's it look like to love ourselves first and take those steps. So,
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored. I'm honored and humbled to be the director of finance for Cuddlist, to sit in this space with both of you. Um, it feels badass and brave a lot, but yet it's a part of the healing journey also, just to have this opportunity. So thank you.
We're very lucky and honored to have you on our team,
Mhm.
but also just to have you in our life.
Mm,
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm
yeah.
glad that I think what I love about my own journey in the Cuddlist last 10 years is getting to a space where we can navigate these dual relationships.
Mhm.
Or in Judy and I's case, I think we're at like a quad level, like quad
Mhm.
layers of relationship. And that's not my standard at all.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I think it's because I live my life kind of in the Cuddlist general idea of a Cuddlist session is my life. It's not that I don't come in with my own needs ever in my own life, but I live by this opening agreement
Mhm.
of I promise to take care of me. I want you to take care of you, and I want us to take care of our relationship. And so navigating this duality, or however many exponential forms of that there are, is another practice in being transparent not shying away from like just calling things or getting ahead of things ahead of time. Like when I first introduced the two of you, wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of what their comfort level was,
Mhm.
calling out power dynamics, these
Mm.
things that we do in our little ecosystem.
Mhm.
I know that I do them everywhere in the world. I
Mhm.
know Keely does them everywhere in the world, and
Mhm.
I know Judy does them everywhere in the world.
Mhm.
And you put all of us together, and it makes it a healthy, generative relationship.
Mhm. Yeah, the synergy is palatable. And I remember Keely. I remember some months back, so it's been almost a year now that I've been director of finance for Cuddlist, and I remember saying to you face to face, like, "You know my story, and you want me to be a part of this?"
Mhm.
And your response was so profound. Do you remember how you
What did I
responded
say?
to that?
I know how I
You
would
said,
respond now, but I don't, what did I say?
yeah, it was like, "I respect and love and appreciate you being here for who you are, not for what was done to you or what happened. You bring value for you being you. And I welcome you in this space, all of you." And that's what you said. All of you is welcome here. And I'm like, wow. And I remember that conversation because I was like, I know I have the skills, I know I have the ability, but like
That was
you know
apparent.
me.
That was apparent. I was like, I absolutely from my end wanted you to be a part of the team. I think I even talked to Michelle at some point about like I don't remember how I said it, but like, do you really think that you really think she would? Like, do you think she'd be comfortable with it? Because God, we needed the skills. We needed the skills that you have that we do not have. We needed
Mhm.
you. We
Yeah.
absolutely
And I
needed
realized
you.
the more I've grown in the company, how unique because I get it from the cuddler standpoint. I get it from the client standpoint, as we said, and I get it from the corporate company standpoint. And it is a very, very unique experience that I feel really humbled and honored about. And the funnest thing is when my friends say, "You're doing what for what?" Like, what is that? And it's amazing the practice of how you explain what Cuddlist is. And I talk about like the Surgeon General's report, and I talk about um, what's it like for you? Do you ever feel like you need a hug once in a while? And someone says, "Never. I never want a hug, never need a hug." And I'm like, "Oh, honey."
I sometimes I
Because
respond to that by saying, did you feel that way all through COVID? Because I feel like there was a profound thing that
Mhm.
happened because of the intense amount of
Yeah.
isolation that was
Yeah.
different than people's normal.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
wasn't there a moment at there
Yeah.
somewhere where you felt a little lonely? There's not a single
Yeah.
one. Like most
Right.
people are like, okay, yeah, no, there
Yeah.
was at least one time in there.
Yeah.
And so they have that
Right.
point of
Yeah.
reference.
Well, I go back to like the beginning and I'm like, when you see an infant, what do you want to do? You just want to hold them. You
Mhm.
want them to know they're safe. And I said, that part is within all of us. It's never left us. It's still a part of who we are and our foundation. And then usually it's like, oh,
Mhm.
so it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And I really commend both of you and your commitment and your investment in the company to be able to provide such an opportunity for healing and to work with therapists in the triadic model for people to know that there is hope and healing out there for each person.
Where can people find you, Judy?
The easiest way is my email, judith_corsiniti@yahoo.com. And that info will be when it's posted. So
Yeah, we'll have that in the show notes for sure. Ah, thank you so much. What an incredible conversation. You said it beautifully. Strength and bravery and vulnerability. I'm trying to think of your exact quote, but yeah, you said that beautifully. I resonate with all of that and experienced it in this conversation. So thank you so much. And
you're so welcome.
yeah, you've given not just us a gift in this, but anyone who sees this and hears it and can resonate with it and can be impacted by it, that you're furthering your mission of hope and healing
Mhm.
in doing that. So thank you so much. And for everyone who's
Yeah.
listening, thank you for being here. And as always, big hugs if we want them.